Welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. Been away for a couple of weeks, but like fine wine, hopefully we get better. Dr. Lopkin, welcome back. Nice to talk with you. And we have a lot on the agenda today. Let's start off with my next door neighbor. I'm just kidding. The Trump indictments. And yes, we know what happened. Our listeners know what happened. But what our listeners are interested in, your overall thoughts and then the political ramifications.
Well, if you read the indictments.
Oh, wait. I'm sorry. I did ask for your opinion. I'm my fault, but I'm not a lawyer, but hello. They're ridiculous.
Yeah.
They're not exactly ironclad.
Oh, well, one, they're not ironclad, but if you actually read the indictments, you're not going to learn anything new because all of this is information that came out from the congressional hearings and the congressional investigation over a year ago. So the question becomes, why was the indictment held until just after new evidence against the Bidens?
Why didn't your ex-girlfriend text you when you tried to call her? The reason why, because she doesn't want to hear from you. It was done on purpose. Yes, of course.
Of course. Every time new information comes up about Hunter Biden, they put out another Trump indictment. And this one is, quite frankly, very scary because part of the evidence that they're using to indict him was a letter that was written about the idea of overturning the election. The problem is the letter was never sent. He never actually did anything. He just talked about it.
Oh, no, you're actually dead on. Also, a lot of it even transcend that. It's a lot about feelings and intentions, not actions. So
Right.
It is scary because, yeah, I feel like I want to, punch my neighbor out. I never did anything, never do anything. And what, now you got the thought police?
Exactly. This is an attack on free speech, on free thought. Now, I don't agree with anything Trump did in regards to January 6th, but the idea that thinking about it, talking about it without actually doing anything is criminal. That is, I always used to hate the term the slippery slope, but we've gone so far down the slippery slope in the last few years that it is now abject terror that the government wants to say, oh, you can't talk about this. You can't think about this. You can't post about this on social media because we don't agree with you.
And if we don't agree with you, we're not going to run against you. Yeah, we will do that, but we'll also indict you. This is a banana republic. Again, I agree with you, Lopkin, 1,000%. I think Trump's actions, before or after January 6th, forget about if he was directly called for an insurrection. It just total lack of judgment.
Yes.
In my eyes, I'm sorry, not speaking for the show, disqualifies him for, future possibilities. But again, a total lack of judgment. But obviously, they're using this and other things because I think they're still politically scared because they know they have Tweedledee and Tweedledum in the White House.
And the other thing about all of this that really frightens me is the fact that between the criminal information that's coming out on the Biden family and the indictments of Donald Trump, we are actually looking at the possibility that the 2024 election may have nothing to do with the American people, and it may all be litigated.
No, yeah, it's really sad. Again, I think, like you said, the slippery slope, I think, started with the bullshit. No, it started when Trump came down the escalator. That's when or even maybe before then with Obama weaponizing the government departmental agencies. But it is here to stay, I believe. And when you got impeachment for making a phone call,
Yeah,
we
what
haven't
has
had one
happened?
since Watergate, and now you can get impeached for I don't know, ordering fast food
Well,
without
no,
a permit.
Clinton was impeached
That's true. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
for Monica Lewinsky, but
Which I did not agree with.
it's yeah, this whole thing, honestly, I think the only way for this to work out for the American people is for both Donald Trump and Joe Biden to go away. Get them out of politics, get them out of positions of power, and let's move forward.
Unfortunately, I wish it were true, but I don't think it's going to happen. We all know that.
Yeah.
And yes, as a as a conservative, I fear just the thought of having numbnuts at the helm for another 4 years. Are you
Yeah,
kidding me?
honestly, no, there is another option for things to get better. It's a long shot option, but I am truly hoping that no labels comes through with a third party.
I think people are thirsty for that. Okay,
Yes,
if it's someone and people are so thirsty, all this you know polarization on the radical left, radical right. People are not there in America. They're somewhere in the middle. They're rational people, and if you had someone that has an IQ above 80, doesn't come from a white trash family, a la Biden, or someone that has the judgment of a ninth grader, America is more than ready to move on. But here's the
absolutely.
problem, Dr. Lopkin. When you have the corporate media, they'll just, like they did what they're doing to RFK, just they'll take them out, meaning they'll dig something up. They'll now RFK, even though he has a prestigious family, he's an intelligent person. No one's perfect. What are they? If you Googled him, to probably be RFK, vax denier.
Yeah, the lies that have been perpetrated about RFK Jr. are ridiculous. But I have noticed something over the past probably, well, it's probably been going on longer, but I became aware of it about 4 months ago. And I've seen it just pick up steam. Is that there is another group that is being ignored. And this is Democrats geographically located basically between the Mississippi River and the Rocky Mountains. The wacko activist class is on the coasts.
Yes,
They're
no
on,
doubt. Yes,
they're in Chicago. Chicago and Illinois is the exception to this. They've gone
and
nuts there.
Minneapolis with the head
But
head anti-Semite. But anyway, go ahead.
most of the voters in this area do not want anything that the Democrats have been doing. They are fed up. And if a real centrist third party comes about, they can grab tons of votes from these folks. Probably
Okay, then the
enough.
question is, and it's been bantered about on some media, is one, RFK ain't going to make it as a Democrat. They'll do anything. It's not going to happen. Why didn't he position himself right now?
I
Good
don't know
question.
why he hasn't. I do know from statements that No Labels has made that they are actually looking to put together a ticket that is comprised of a Democrat and a Republican working together. And the last time we had the possibility of this was in, I believe it was 2008, when they were talking about the possibility of a McCain Lieberman ticket. And
I remember that. Yes.
unfortunately, Yes, and unfortunately, Joe torpedoed that because he was not comfortable crossing the party lines that far. Ironically, Joe Lieberman is now one of the leaders of No Labels.
Yeah, well, he was thrown out of the Democratic Party, and he's got way too much common sense to be in that whack job party now.
Yes,
At least the coastal Democrats. But the interesting caveat to what you just mentioned, if he did run with McCain, McCain would have won because it was that
yes,
close that the vice president did have a factor.
absolutely. And we would all be in a much better place if that had happened.
Not even close. So, and again, on the political and the investigatorial front, we have Devin Archer, his testimony, basically CNN back to their old ways, calling it a clown show. I believe that's what they said. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah,
Not that's what they said on the
right,
actual
but
hearing.
the liberals and the Democrats decided this was a clown show before it ever happened. And this was evident in the fact that only one Democrat actually showed up at the hearing. And he made ridiculous statements of, oh, yes, he said Joe Biden did talk to these business partners, but it was just about the weather.
I
Real,
love that. How many times you're in a business meeting and you might call your wife or one of your and say, I'm about to close a big deal, but could you tell me what's the weather like next week? And
right.
doing it 30, 20, or 30 times.
But
There is something called a smartphone, and you can kind of get the weather on that. And that's all. I'm just throwing it out there.
the
But you need
key
the
to
big
this,
guy to tell
though,
you what. A guy who can't even probably spell weather, you need his input into what the weather's actually. Because, by the way, he lies so much. He probably said to someone that he was a meteorologist at one time.
wouldn't
He was
surprise
a
me.
professor at UPenn. Why not?
But the key to all of this is two things. One, it's that Biden has been lying about never talking to Hunter about his business. Clearly, if he's meeting with Hunter's business associates, he knew what was going on. But more importantly, even if there is no criminal intent, the members of our government, the executive branch, the congressional branch, have to sign a statement of ethics. And this was a definite violation of those ethics. If Hunter Biden had called Joe and said, "Oh, I want you to talk to these people that I'm meeting with," Joe could have taken the first call. But after that call, he was basically required to get on the phone with his son and say, "Don't ever do that again." And he didn't.
Well,
They
it was a
also,
criminal enterprise. They're grifters. It is
yes,
the white trash family. How do on average, he made up, what, $150,000, probably as vice president, a little less than that as a senator. How do you have three houses and you were basically broke at one point, and now you have three beachfront house properties in Delaware? Was it because I know he's such a genius at business? That's probably how it happened because he has that UPenn degree. Oh
well,
no,
again,
that's wrong. Sorry.
right. And that's another thing. We have talked about this several times on the podcast where nobody can figure out what the Biden family business does. Well, Devin actually testified what they do. They sell the Biden brand. And
Yes.
it was said these people didn't want to be in business with Washington, D.C. or D.C. insiders. They wanted to be in business with the Biden brand. And that Biden brand is Joe Biden. It's certainly not a Coke fueled Hunter or any other of the screw up members of the Biden family. They
Capable of
wanted,
nothing.
right, they wanted to be in business with Joe Biden. Now, somebody else brought up an interesting point that let's assume that Joe didn't actually do anything for these people. Well, that means that he and Hunter are guilty of fraud because that's what they were selling. They were selling influence. If he did something for these folks, he's guilty of influence peddling. If he didn't, he's guilty of fraud.
Do you
Either
think this has any
way, he's a
political legs?
criminal.
Do you think this has political legs? I actually, in spite of the corporate media, I believe it has to.
I think it does because things keep coming out and the Democrats keep changing the story. They go, oh, well, he didn't mean this, or oh, he never, the White House used to say that, Joe Biden had no knowledge of his son's business. Now they've changed that to, oh, Joe Biden was never in business with Hunter. It's like, so the lies are coming out and even the White House can't cover it up at this point.
I believe that Joe is such a pathological liar, can't help himself. I think there's enough there. There is enough there that at least it's going to shed some additional shade on him. And he's actually right now, he doesn't need any more shade. He's at 39% approval. Thoughts on that? That's bad.
Yeah, he's at 39% approval.
1/4 of
Kamala
people,
Harris has
according to a Rasmussen poll, have confidence in him. Bad.
yeah, and Kamala Harris has the lowest approval ratings ever of a vice president. And she was asked about this, and her response was, oh, well, there are polls that I'm doing very well in. Of course, she can't name any of them because they don't exist. You are starting to see the erosion of the Biden protection. I'm forgetting the name of the person, but there is now another Democrat exploring a real presidential run. And you are starting to see Democrats talking to donors saying, if I jump into the race, will you back me? There is no longer a definitive feel that Biden is going to be the candidate. And, we talk a
Well, let
lot
me
about the
interject
polls.
something. You always talk about, the moderate Democrats. Well, they should speak up now because, like I said before, and it's
Yes.
no great epiphany, that another 4 years of genius, we're in big trouble. Big trouble. That's not political. That's just the facts.
Yeah, no, he is not. He wasn't capable when he started
No.
his tenure as president. He's certainly not capable of governing for another 4 years. But the other thing that we really have to take into consideration is, we all still rely on the polls and, oh, Donald Trump is so far ahead and Joe Biden is so far ahead. At this point in 2016, Donald Trump was at 1% of the vote, or technically 2015, but the 2016 campaign. Donald Trump was at 1% of the vote. Jeb Bush was the one to beat.
Oh, he was the odds-on favorite. He was.
Yes.
It was like a Hillary preordained.
Yeah. So the polls at this point mean almost nothing.
That is something that we need to reiterate because everyone's got this Trump, fixation. A lot of it at this point is just name recognition. That's it.
Yes.
I mean,
it is.
I think we need some new blood.
Name recognition. He started his campaign and his fundraising basically in 2020, so he had a jump on everybody, but he's been spending much more than he's taking in. Donors are starting to look at other candidates.
But
so
I know he's still way ahead, but he has slipped about 10 points in the polls.
Yes. So
he's now
that
at
far ahead. Yeah, the fact that he's that far ahead at this point in time means virtually nothing.
Let's hope so, because I think as a conservative and someone that loves America, again, Trump is probably the only one I believe that he's the only, including DeSantis, that can lose to Biden. Another Democrat, that's another issue. But right now, Trump's the only one because he'll rally the base, the Democratic base. Your
Yes,
thoughts?
Democrats will come out just to vote against
Yes.
Donald Trump. And that's what happened in 2020. Even the most liberal pundits have come forward and said almost nobody came out in 2020 to vote for Joe Biden. It was all to vote against Donald Trump. And they'll do it again. The question is, will they come out and do it if Joe Biden is the candidate? Because he has been a complete failure, even among diehard Democrats. They look at him and, it's absolutely ridiculous. um,
Embarrassing.
his policies have actually led to the U.S. credit rating being downgraded for only the second time in history.
Be underreported, but of course the Biden White House response is denial. They're calling it the Trump downgrade. Really, you've been in
Yeah,
office 3 years. Really?
yeah. This had nothing to do with Donald
Of
Trump.
course not.
This has to do with the fact that they passed so much spending and they don't care about the debt. They showed this. They just want to keep borrowing. Well, you can't do that. There comes a point where you have to take responsibility for your debt. And I will point out, he's real big on saying, oh, it's the Trump downgrade. The only other time in history that we got a credit downgrade was in 2011 during the Obama Biden administration. You
Is
think
there a
that their
correlation there?
all right, you think their policies had nothing to do with this? They are responsible for the only two credit downgrades in American history.
100% agree. I think it's a story that'll be underreported. I find it pathetic just from a character issue. It's like blaming your ex-wife that you were married to 20 years ago for your current layoff. It's like, really? Like, it's just, but he's never done that. Just look in the camera and say, we'll have to, we will work hard to, come back from this. Just be a mensch, as they say, but he's incapable, isn't he?
Yeah, he has never accepted responsibility for any of his actions. And that's not just as president, that's as vice president, that's as a senator, that's as a father and a grandfather.
Who doesn't claim
He,
to have, doesn't even acknowledge one of his grandkids.
well,
What a guy, Joe
he,
Lunchpail.
he just did acknowledge her because even the New York Times came out and said you have to acknowledge all of your grandchildren. Your political future depends on it because you're trying to convince people that you're still lunch pail Joe and you're a great guy. And everybody on both sides of the aisle came after him when he refused to say he had a seventh grandchild.
Well, my little thought on this, I think, and we talked about this when with the Afghanistan pullout, and he's looking at his watch. I think he's one of the biggest SOBs. Always been a pathological underachiever and liar.
Yes, we are
And
seeing
he's
the real Joe Biden. The lunch pail Joe,
a
the
bunch of
guy
shit.
next door was always a carefully crafted image. But we know he's suffering from dementia. And when somebody suffers from dementia, they start acting out, but it makes them more of who they always were. So if you were a great guy, when you start fading, you're still a great guy. You're
Yeah,
nice. You're calm. When you're a son of a bitch, you become more of an SOB. And that's exactly what we're seeing.
totally unhinged. I agree. I think, my call is to moderate Democrats, which I would vote for. Someone with common sense, someone that, is a moderate, a centrist. That's, I think would actually clean Biden's clock.
I think they would. The problem we have, and it's in both parties, is that both sides, the primaries, have been hijacked by the radicals. So you have the Democratic primary being hijacked by the radical left. You've got the Republican primary being hijacked by the radical right. Neither one can really win in a general election, but they're just destroying their own parties by not letting a more centrist candidate get the airtime, get the attention, because that's why in 2020 Joe Biden went, "Oh no, I'm a centrist. I'm going to bring everybody together." Because if he had actually said what he ended up doing, he would have lost.
Yes, or if the corporate media reported on the Hunter laptop, that might
Yes.
have been another factor. But that's water under the bridge, as they say. But you know something, talking about water, supposedly with global warming, you can have rising tides. Kamala, the genius, another genius, in a speech said one of the ways we can reduce the climate change, global warming, is reduce the population. Can you explain to me how you reduce the population?
Yes,
Just a thought. They had to
that
retract it, of course.
of course they did. And I don't know if that was a Freudian slip or if it was just her general stupidity, but wow, you had a whole bunch of
No,
folks going,
John Kerry
"Wow,
said the same thing. We have too many
yeah,
people.
she
John
said
Kerry said that.
they said the quiet part out loud with that one." Um,
Exactly. That's it.
yes, overpopulation has been a problem that we've talked about since the 70s. But the liberal left, the environmentalists, have basically done everything they could over the past 60 years to stop us advancing to the point where we can deal with the problem. You're old enough to remember this. I don't know how old our average listener is, but back in the 70s, toys, furniture, almost everything you've had around the house was made out of wood. And the environmentalists went, "No, we can't do that. We have to make it out of plastic." And you went to the supermarket and you got paper bags. And they went, "No, we can't use paper bags anymore. We have to use plastic." Well, guess what? Plastic is made out of oil. In the 80s, they were all against nuclear power. It's like, "Oh, it's too dangerous." Well, you know what? Maybe in 1980 there was an element of danger, but technology doesn't stand still. In 1980, your phone was attached to your wall and you had a cord and you were stuck there with that cord. Smartphones didn't exist.
You paid
Imagine,
LPs made out of vinyl.
right. Well, now those are back, but
Yeah, actually, they're
we're
better. I take that back. Yes.
yes, but imagine the technology that would have progressed had we kept moving forward. And in fact, now we're starting to see it. Just this week on Monday, the Georgia Power brought online the first completely new nuclear reactor in the United States in over 2 decades. And they've got plans for a second one. The reactor that went online is going to provide power for 50,000 homes and businesses in Georgia, Florida, and Alabama. And nuclear energy is clean, it is carbon neutral. And just because I know somebody's going to go, "Oh, but you have all the nuclear waste." No, you don't. In France, they've been recycling nuclear waste for 30 years.
Well, I really have a problem with that. Not, I mean, you're 100% right, but it's very fascinating to me that the Democrats and the liberal intelligentsia, backed up by corporate media, always claim they're the party of science and conservatives are Neanderthals, knuckle draggers. They're usually wrong almost on everything. They were wrong. We actually started in '78 with the No Nukes concert and all the hysteria. They're all emotionally driven. Um, Guess what? Your electric car, geniuses, are plugged into a dirty grid, okay, that's like 30% coal fired. There you go. If you had nuclear power, a greater degree of nuclear power, again, with technology, who knows what would have been, and we'd have a clean grid.
Well, well, we would have a clean grid, but I mean, the electric car has another problem. The construction of electric cars, the mining for the batteries, the
Oh,
mining for all
100%.
the elements that cause so much destruction in the environment that an electric car has to be on the road for 10 years before it makes up for all of the environmental damage in its construction. Problem with this, the average electric car has a lifespan of 8 years.
Well, that doesn't, fit the narrative, so you'll never see that on CNN.
Right.
Yeah, you probably, won't also see that it's been kicking around Washington to put such stringent regulations that essentially you're banning the combustion engine by 2038.
Yeah, it is
There you go.
absolutely ridiculous. And I have a big bone to pick with the congressional delegation from Connecticut, where we are broadcasting from, because if you want electric cars, there is a technology that is much more efficient, much safer for the environment, and that is hydrogen fuel cells. And we actually manufacture hydrogen fuel cells
Oh, we're one of the
here.
big innovators in
Yes,
Connecticut. It used to be
here
United
in
Technologies, yes.
yes, here in Connecticut. And yet the congressional delegation, our idiot senators, our moron Congress people have not fought for this technology, which is
You mean
more
Chris
green.
Murphy doesn't know about the technology and the science of hydrogen cells? God, that's
Well,
shocking.
you
He's a
just put
genius.
you just put your finger on it. It comes down to following the science, which, as we've just explained, not the Democrats' strong suit.
No, it's definitely not their forte. But stay tuned. We never know. We could be back to horse and buggy. Before the combustion engine, it was thought of as a relief to the problem of horse poop in the cities. So
Yes.
maybe we'll go back to horse and buggies and get reunited with that situation. But we also have, again, this corporate media and corporate wokeism and Disney. You talk about, you say, you were around in the 70s, referring to me, all that, which I certainly was, and remember No Nukes. I remember the album, but I also remember Disney as a kid, and you know, I have to say, how do you screw that up? I mean, you got the Disney brand. I mean, just all the movies, even stupid movies that they used to come out with, like I don't know, the horse that cooked that kicked the field goals. Blah, blah. They were all
The
fun. They were
app
harmless. And
the
how?
Apple Dumpling Gang.
Yeah, I mean, they were funny. They were stupid, but that's what kids like, and that's what Disney was. It was good. It was great. Um, captured any audience, any demographic in terms of young people and kids, and even parents. It's not something you would hate to see if you brought your kids. But now Disney is in the process because of their wokeism and their forced exposure that is forcing innocent people that just want a break from the day to day, ins and outs with their family. So between raising the prices on their theme parks to astronomical levels and coming out with crappy, shitty woke content, they're now in the process of laying off a third of their workforce. Plus, bantering about spinning off. You talk about Connecticut. What will happen to Bristol? I have no idea. Um, if is spinning off ESPN. Well
Well,
managed over the last 10 years, hasn't it been?
yeah, well, it's not just ESPN. Disney is looking at selling off a number of
Oh, yeah, you're
divisions,
right.
including some of their streaming assets. They may sell off the theme parks. There is also the talk that they are looking for somebody to buy the entire company. And Wall Street has been looking into this, and the only potential bidders that they are talking about right now
Chinese.
are Apple and Amazon. And the reason that they're talking about Apple and Amazon, and quite frankly, I don't see any benefit to either Apple or Amazon to buying Disney at this point. But the reason they're talking about Apple and Amazon is because the only feasible buyer of Disney is somebody that doesn't rely on Disney content to make a profit.
You would never think that, would you, years
Yeah,
ago? That was
it
their
is.
strength.
Yes, it was
Was
absolutely
their strength.
Disney was a powerhouse. Every movie they came out with, Pixar would set record after record every time they came out with a movie. But what happened is in the boardrooms, and it wasn't just Disney, this happened across the industries. If somebody did something that made you go, "Oh, that was a bad idea," in their personal life. John Lasseter at Pixar had an affair with somebody at the company, so they fired him. Notice Pixar hasn't turned out a profitable movie since. Um, I was just reading a book. They're talking about somebody at HP back, going back a few years, who expensed a dinner with a consultant, which is you're supposed to do that. The consultant didn't get the contract, so she claimed sexual harassment. They fired him. Well, guess what? HP stock dropped. We saw CBS fall apart when they started firing people. Oh, these people, they behaved badly. Well, guess what? That bad behavior didn't actually have anything to do with their jobs. And because you got rid of them, you got rid of good people performing well, and all of these companies started to fall apart.
Well, again, it gets all true. Also, I believe content had a lot to do with it. I think it's the whole Bud Light scenario is not understanding who your audience is. You're sipping Chardonnay at a Democratic fundraising event talking about wokeism, and you think all the country's sipping Chardonnay at a vineyard in Southern
No,
California. Guess what? They're not. There you go.
no,
Just
no,
a
they're
thought. That's
not. And
free consulting from Sherman Consulting Company.
yes, and talking about Bud Light, they had just announced massive layoffs
Even
because
with their
they are no
distributors, are
yes,
not even the company, distributors. You can't
the
get rid of this shit.
distributors no, the distributors have come to the conclusion that Bud Light's audience is never coming back. They've gone to other brands, and the distributors are saying, when you get right down to it, if you were a Bud Light drinker, Miller Light, Coors Light, it's all basically the same stuff.
It's the
So,
same stuff.
yeah. So you switch brands, it's not going to make a difference to you. But Anheuser-Busch is going to have a lot of problems trying to recover from this.
No, that was the number one beer, and it's interesting because when I go biking or I do my hike, I always get a beer, the singles
Yep.
out of the case, right? Then I take it home and I drink my beer, right? And now I always see the singles are always the stuff that no one wants. Let's just get right to the chase. It's all Bud Light. I have almost no choice. In other words, for just a single one can of beer. So yeah, I think they're in a world of hurt. I don't feel sorry for them. It's like having a friend, an associate that just screwed up so many times. It's their fault. So what can I tell you? Cry me a river. On a lighter note, we have cocaine sharks off the coast of Miami. Um,
Yep.
Basically, bootleggers bringing it in cocaine in and dumping it overboard before the Coast Guard, and sharks are actually eating it. And maybe it's good because they have less interest in eating.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, this is people saw the movie Cocaine Bear. Now we have cocaine sharks. It sounds like a bad movie from the Sci-Fi Channel.
You know
But
something, it really
where
does, and it
yeah,
also, you know something, it's sometimes things get into the is how do you validate it? But it's definitely been in the press. I can tell
right,
you
but
that.
where are the environmentalists? I mean, cuz this is not healthy for not just the sharks, but any sea life in the area.
Yeah, they say cocaine. A cocaine diet usually isn't too good for you. There you go.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, well, it's pretty interesting. So let's. Oh, DeSantis lays off, or is in the process of laying off a third of his staff. And as we speak, by the way, this is August 2nd, that the Dow is down over 300 points, I assume, in large part because of the downgrade, but it's a Trump downgrade and a Trump stock market plunge. I'm sure of that. But back to the DeSantis laying off a third, I believe I've never seen you talk about my longevity. Let's just use that term. I've never seen it hasn't in recent time. I've never seen a politician with so much, let's say, hype, spin, potential crash in a matter of 6 months.
No, if you look back, we've seen this before. Gary Hart, actually Joe Biden in his one of his first
Well,
presidential
no, I
when
have to. I have to. I was in Philly, very close to. No, no. He went from 1% to a half percent. The thing about Joe Biden, again, being in the geographic area, he was, and Trump said this in the debate, probably the only good part of his debate performance. He's always been a moron, and he continues
right.
to be. Now he's just a moron with dementia. But yeah, Biden didn't plummet. He was he's like he's always been an idiot. It's a minor point, but
But
yeah,
I mean,
there's
you
others.
want
I get the point.
yeah, I mean, you want to take the the largest plunge in history, Walter Mondale, who
True.
was the heir apparent. Everybody, and he only won Minnesota and Washington D.C.
Massachusetts,
And
possibly. Yeah,
no, it was just Minnesota and Washington D.C.
I
and
think
he
you're right.
lost
Yeah, yeah.
every other state. So yeah, I mean, we've seen the plummet before. Um, we'll see it again. DeSantis did not have a great team in place. And you saw that by his responses to things. So, and again, it's not unusual for candidates to do overhauls in their teams. Hell, Kamala Harris has overhauled her team as vice president, what, 8 times so far since she took office?
But
So
that's not her fault. There you go.
right. So hopefully he'll put together a better team, a more
I
efficient
think he should have
team.
waited. He's a young
Uh,
guy. I think it was too much chomping at the bit. If he held his powder and is kind of a noxious environment right now for politics, I think it would have been better to wait for another 4 years. That's just my humble opinion.
yeah, and and there are candidates that I think would be doing very well now that have said uh, now is not the right time. Most notably, Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin, who Virginia, unlike most states, has a one term limit. So he can't even run for governor again. But even so, he decided now is not the right time. I'm going to focus on Virginia. And maybe in 2028, he'll throw his hat into the ring.
Smart guy. Anyway, we all make mistakes. DeSantis is young enough to spring. I also think he showcased or he spotlighted too many things he didn't have to do. He went a little too far. It initially worked. The anti-woke thing, okay, I think sometimes you can go too much, you can go too much into the weeds on that, but I'm not a political
Yes.
advisor. UFOs, the UFO hearings at the Capitol, uh, basically proof positive evidence. I'm not really believing it, but just thought I'd throw it out there. Maybe Biden's
Yeah,
a UFO. Maybe he's
right.
like it came from a UFO, right? He
The
might
first
claim
thing
that
I thought
actually.
he might, but the first thing I thought of when the UFO hearings started was the scene in Men in Black where Will Smith walks into Men in Black headquarters for the first time and sees the screens where they're monitoring all of the famous aliens. And and all I was thinking is this is the Biden administration's next excuse. You can't expect Kamala Harris to know all of this stuff because she's not from here. She's an alien.
You
The
never,
entire
you
the
never know.
entire the entire thing struck me as the Democrats or the government in general going, look over here, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
You know something? I agree with you 100% because it's not a major issue. It's kind of a feel-good issue, if you will. So it's like a way to just go, well, oh, they're not that incompetent. Yes, they are on both sides, by the way.
Yeah.
Speaking of one of the nicest and most competent people in the Western Hemisphere, Justin Trudeau and his lovely wife are now separating. Why did she wait so long? Is my only why'd she get married to the guy? God,
My first thought when I saw that announcement was, see, even his wife can't stand him. It's absolutely
Do you think
amazing.
Canada's going to kick his ass out already? I mean, the
I
guy's
I don't
totally incompetent.
I don't know if they will or not. And I go back. We mentioned a few weeks ago that the Exvadio Podcast Network is now 10 years old. Well, 10 years ago, one of the first podcasts I did was an interview with someone from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. And he had a business on the side that we were talking about. But at the time, the mayor of Toronto was Rob Ford. And for those of you who don't remember Rob Ford, he was found using cocaine. He was a crackhead. He was, and the first question that I posed to this gentleman was, as a member of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, what does Rob Ford have to do to get arrested up there? And Rob Ford had been reelected. So
True.
I don't know if the Canadians are going to kick Trudeau out or not. But to be fair, we've reelected morons here too. Look at Marion Barry.
I agree with that, but I do think that Canada, sad and it's interesting, but that's a tale of two cities. I think you have Western Canada is more conservative. I think the French speaking part is a lot more liberal, and I think increasingly they have less and less in common.
Well, Quebec in particular has been wanting to secede from Canada for decades.
I would say good riddance.
So it's not a surprise that there's a divide there. We have divides here right now. It actually looks like most countries are severely divided politically, and that's becoming more and more of a problem. Are we heading to a point where not just the US and Canada, but the entire world is essentially ungovernable?
That is something that would be the subject of a great book, because I believe that's true definitely in America. We're now not really a unified, we're fiefdoms of individual or group talking points, beliefs, and increasingly have nothing in common. The Midwest has nothing in common with Napa Valley or New York.
That's very true, yes.
Speaking of truth, we'll conclude that after the Tucker Carlson debacle, I put the knives or the fork in much too early. I do that sometimes even when I cook and it's raw. That Fox is now on the ascent, aren't they?
They are. There was a lot of problems with their primetime ratings after they got rid of Tucker Carlson, but that was primarily because they did not have a lineup in place for primetime. They were rotating hosts. They were exploring what to do. Well,
plus, I think there was pushback and blowback from Tucker. The firing, not him.
Yes. But since they announced their new primetime lineup, not only are they beating everybody, they are beating MSNBC and CNN combined. And where
let me just go over the new math. So if 10's like, the most you can have for viewers, MSNBC, let's say, is a 7. And then when you say combining with CNN, that's a point 0.2.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, there's cable access that's basically rivaling them.
But now we are
But it is
seeing,
a fact.
Greg Gutfeld was the king of late night at
Love
11
him.
o'clock. They have moved him to 10 o'clock. And Fox News is now beating some primetime shows. So,
Oh no, Fox News is in terms
yeah.
of late night is beating which, oh god, like we talked about before, the Yule log, from
Oh, well,
New
no.
York could
Gutfeld
beat.
has been winning in late night for quite a while.
Yeah,
But
that's right.
now,
Because go
right,
ahead.
but now he's on at 10 o'clock, not 11. He's actually beating some of the broadcast network's 10 o'clock shows.
I love that. Well, interesting. CNN, they had their opportunity. There was a revolt at the palace doors. They went back to woke, unreliable reporting, and they're being kicked to the curb, aren't they?
They are. And, it's really a shame because at one point, CNN was a brilliant network. Shows like Point Counterpoint. Back when Wolf Blitzer was on, they
When he
had
was
report.
Norm.
Yes, they had reporters, stationed.
Well, how
I
about
can't
Larry
remember.
King? I used to watch him all
Well,
the
Larry
time.
King,
He was
yes.
excellent.
I'm trying to remember the name of the reporter. He was stationed in Baghdad, and they used to just refer to him as the hunk of Baghdad because but he was there doing actual reporting, and CNN doesn't report on anything anymore.
No, again, it's not just about political ideology. I think everyone's yearning for you. You mentioned Fox. Well, I'm not that big of a. I don't have to be meat and potatoes with Sean because it's the same regurgitated. Yeah, Biden's a retard. I got it. Okay, that's kind of known or whatever. I think the same thing is true even with people that are more left leaning. You don't want to be fed a diet of BS. I mean, you want some insight.
You do, and that's the main reason that CNN's ratings are down. It's not like they lost conservative viewers. They lost liberal viewers because even the most diehard left wing people stopped believing them because they kept banging away at the same thing over and over. And it turned out they were wrong. They
Yeah, and that's the thing.
lied.
That is a very desaleable point. Is again, I don't care who you are. Again, just me personally, I can't speak for everyone, but yes, I'm more conservative leaning. But I don't want to be fed red meat day after day. I'm sorry, I'm not picking. I'm Sean Hannity. It's the same thing over and over. It's just boring. It's not like I'm insulted or alienated from it. It's just okay. I can move on. I can watch reruns of Get Smart. A lot funnier and more interesting. I think that's what happened to CNN. But anyway, it's been a 2-week absence. Good to talk with you again. I'm sure our listeners will be anxious to download our latest, this edition. And we'll be back next week, won't we?
Yes, we will. And of course, you can catch every episode of Carnivore Bites at xvadio.com/podcasts, the Carnivore Radio website, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and other platforms that respect freedom of speech.
Thank you, Dr. Lopkin.
We'll see you next time.